It is Hearthstone time. I am Raven, and joining me is Sottle for our first cast of the day. It's going to be match number 3, and I'm excited for it to be Definition versus Ike. Ike, you know, probably the people's hero, I would say now, or the people's champion, going up against Definition, which is potentially the last chance for Korea.
To be honest, I've checked out. I just want Indian food now. It's all I've got on my mind. No, we've got a great match coming up, and it is set up very well. Ike, having spoken to him a couple of times in the lead up to this, is not the most confident. He's a very confident man. He's a believer in his own abilities, but he does feel like he's potentially up against it here in terms of deck lineups.
Right, and you know, I interviewed Ike after his match yesterday, and he said, you know, there were a lot of moments where I just didn't feel I played well, especially as we look at the deck list with that odd Paladin. He said, yeah, I should have gone more aggressive overall, but you know, that is good. Once you can recognize like faults in play, Ike's definitely a player that can just fix them up pretty quickly, and he's had the rest of yesterday to work on that, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table. But Definition, the Hakar Druid has been banned, Sol. We don't get to see that deck play out, and maybe get a little bit of confusion as we cast Definition's Hakar Druid yesterday, and it did look a little bit dicey at some moments.
It did, but also the ban on the other side is interesting to me. It's Ike's mid-range hunter that went down, and based on, again, talking to Ike last night, actually, I think he expected it was going to be his even lock that was banned out, and that's what he was at least initially preparing for. So I don't know whether that ban of the hunter has kind of thrown a spanner in the works of the preparation, or whether he's happy because he thinks his opponent has banned incorrectly.
Well, to be honest, something that surprised me for the past day and a half so far is we've seen way more Hunter be allowed to be played than I thought was going to happen, because Hunter is just powerful. We see it time and time again grabbing wins. So I think it's just a good ban at this point, because there are strategies and there are tactics and there are just good decks. And sometimes you just have to ban out the good one. But let's get into game number 1, and it's going to be a good old-fashioned priest mirror. So basically we'll only last till turn 9.
Not quite, though. It is a priest class mirror, but of course Definition is playing the kind of more pure, rounded out anti-aggro version, which is the wall priest, as opposed to the straight up Xerx's cloning gallery that Ike is packing. But the decks are more similar than you might expect, because Ike is a fan of the Witchwood Grizzly build of the clone priest. You'll hear this about him a lot. He is very much a, you know, draw a dude, play your guys on curve. If you play it, then it's in play. That's the philosophy. So he loves having those extra 5 drops, so he does just have the freedom to, you know, play a more minion-centric version of Xerx's cloning gallery. And, you know, we were riffing back and forth yesterday about how I felt justified by Ike saying that he has never killed someone before turn 9 with Xerx's cloning gallery. But that speaks to his build of the deck and his style of play with the deck, where he doesn't tunnel on that strategy with the deck. He does play a much more minion-centric version.
Right, and just a background you talk about, although the decks are different, they are similar, is that Definition is playing Spellstones. He is going to res rather large minions, but the idea for his burst combo is not Mind Blast with Valence and Malygos. It is that fellow in the middle, the Moshog Enforcer, and they said Warden then, just to pick different card names.
Yeah.
Along with the Witchwood Grizzly that sit at 14 and 12 health respectively, and then there are 2 Divine Spirits, 1 in a fire and 1 Topsy-Turvy to try and help us any cheeky guys as well that should be knocking around. So the big burst comes from the minion actually hitting the target, as opposed to the spell damage burst out of nowhere. So Ike really has to keep a focus with cards like Mass Hysteria and his Psychic Scream as to when he feels pressured to remove the potential threat on the board.
And whilst that frankly incredible breakdown was going on from my broadcast colleague Raven, Ike made the picture-perfect optimal play on turn 2 in a priest mirror, which is heal your opponent's face while emoting.
The really big was, I'm not gonna lie to anyone, I was just grabbing a water quickly because that was quite long, what I said, you know, just wet the whistle and stuff. But look at that, then I was like, looked, I was like, wait, what did I do on turn 2 that was so good? It's Clone Priest.
Straight up optimal.
That's right, Sol's just being a silly fellow.
Shadow Vision's in hand for Ike, but again, he's seeing, again, optimal play coming out here. And a lot of people might be sitting at home thinking, well, he has a Shadow Visions. He has enough mana to cast his Shadow Visions. Why cast Shadow Visions? Reason being, because particularly with this build of the deck, because there's the extra minions in there, so you can try and fight minion for minion and go the rezzing, Spellstone, you know, just constant board presence route. Or you can go for that big burst damage route, whether it be through a Xerx's Cloning Gallery or like a Malygos plus Velen Resurrection. that Shadow Visions is a very adaptable card because those two strategies demand that you take different cards off Shadow Visions. So the more information you gather before you cast that Shadow Visions, the more informed a choice you can make when you do cast it.
Yeah, it really is a double-edged sword in that, later on, even if the choices you can be offered aren't as overall good, say like double Mind Blast has been drawn as an easy example.
Right.
Yes, unfortunate, you're not getting a third Mind Blast, but you have a much better idea of what you are going to be getting. So even though the pool's smaller, it can still work out to advantage, as you said. Going to this, I'm not gonna lie to anyone, we didn't see too many crazy turns in the first few turns of this game, and we're never going to, because that's just how it shakes out with no early minions for either side really to play out here.
Yeah, Ike actually trimming his deck down in some areas. He is playing the Witchwood Grizzlies as mentioned, but they're kind of directly replacing the Gilded Gargoyles in the deck. He is not playing those.
He's playing one.
Is he?
You are a liar.
Oh, I'm sorry. He is playing a single copy. That's right. We were having a discussion of how he had the argument with Zalay. I think Zalay told him to play 0, but he couldn't bring himself to do it and ended up putting 1 in the deck.
I'd love if that was just the general deck building approach. You have, say you and me, we built a deck, and I wanted a card and you didn't, so we just put a 1-off in.
Just average it out.
Yeah. The deck would be very bad if you did that with every card. We see the Shadow
And
Visions
so
come out now.
Reno Jackson was born.
Yeah. That was, how did they know? That's weird that they got to that. We do see the Shadow Visions come out there and does get an extra spell stone, which again, we were talking about yesterday. I hate to admit it, but they don't always kill you on turn 9, and sometimes just creating multiple waves of large minions is just too powerful for a lot of decks.
You see there a little bit of a tournament background, competitive background of our two players just scrolling across the bottom. That DreamHack Denver performance that you just saw from Ike, it was really his breakout. He was a name that was involved in a couple of high-profile practice groups, and he was a name behind the scenes and a player that especially the North American scene had a lot of respect for, but the world at large did not really have an appreciation for how good Ike was until that incredible, I believe, undefeated
flawless
run
victory
through DreamHack Denver to take home the tournament.
If he would have just won it, it's still really good. Without losing. It's incredible. And then we see the Ziliax, no attacks, maybe because it's a Ziliax versus Ziliax board. I don't know what the rules are when it comes to this all.
Yeah, you can see Ike, quite bizarrely, through the first 4 turns of the game where he really had no options, where he was kind of ruled out Shadow Visions, did end up casting it on 4, but he really got deep in the tank in terms of thought process about his decisions when there were really none from turns 1 to 4, because he didn't really have anything to do. When he got to turn 5, where he did have options, he did not think about it at all. His mind went, I have 5 mana, I have a Ziliax, I'm going to play it. And it's honestly difficult to overstate how real a strategy that is for Ike. He genuinely does live by that philosophy. Some of this other hit them in the face so they have less health or kill it so it's dead, like that can reach the point of meme, but the Ikeism of play it so it's in play, that is real advice that people should follow.
Yeah, just like always, value trade.
Raven, careful, all right?
Okay, let's get back to real talk. One thing to keep a note of right now, talking about hands and how they're played, is Definition has double Divine Spirit in a fire in hand. So now, if any of these big minions stick to the board, even Tar Creeper, Ike has to just think for just a moment, what's my health total? Can I just die next turn if I don't do anything?
Right.
And it's always been the case with this combination of cards from Priest, Divine Spirit, and a Fire that every minion that hits the board is terrifying. But the second you overcompensate and try and remove early minions when they don't have it, you start to use up that removal that's key later on.
And this is a real decision point for Definition, and that answers the question I was about to say. This will show you where his mind is at, because with a Power Word Shield in hand, with 2 Divine Spirits in hand, with an Inner Fire in hand, he's very, very close to being able to turn, even as you said, just this Tar Creeper into lethal.
27 him next
So,
turn.
but then with a second Power Word Shield pick, he then increases that damage output even more. But the other options, things like Psychic Scream, can allow him to stall out the game for longer if Ike starts to generate big minion presence of his own. And he doesn't really have answers to big minions in his hand to deal with Ike's side of the board. So the fact that he did so quickly just go ahead and take that Power Word Shield shows that he is very much in the mindset of saying, I'm going to get lethal on my opponent sooner rather than later.
Right, and straight away we see Shadow Word Pain gone. That can kill some of the bigger minions. That can kill a Witchwood Grizzly, which is much more of a threat overall because it's it's easier to get the damage off because it's got much higher health than a Tar Creeper. And Shadowwood Pain gone. Now, apart from a Psychic Scream, Ike doesn't have a direct answer to a threat.
A threat such as a 214 Divine Shield. It's still one of the weirdest looking minions I've ever seen in this game, just in terms of like stats. 214 with a Divine Shield?
Working on whether we can get a turn 8 kill.
No.
I did know the answer to that, but it was funny anyway.
Not with a single Mind Blast.
Oh wait, still doable.
I guess it was possible with Lyra, yeah. I spoke too soon. The Lyra
Please,
dream
Ike,
is real.
this can be the first time.
Oh, no!
He gets it!
No!
Yes!
No!
Ike, you can no longer say you have never played Clone and won. Raven is correct again, twice in 2 days. When will the madness end? Ike takes game number 1 and Sottle is distraught.
Oh, I've got nothing. I'd like to announce my formal retirement from Hearthstone casting. It's been a good run up until this point, but the sheer weight of this crushing Raven victory, and more importantly, that crushing Ike victory, has broken my spirit and my passion for casting Hearthstone.
That's it. I guess we're done. So maybe we'll be back after this. So don't go anywhere. We'll find out who wins this series.
이거는 데피니션이고 한국에서 왔다. 등급전에서 많이 연습을 해서 올 수 있었던 것 같아.
Definition is just choosing to work out whether he wants to either South Sea Deckhand this, whether he wants to Glacial Shard it, but either way, it just removes a nice bounce effect.
그런 것들을 이제 조금 배운 것 같아요. 어떻게 하면 더 좋게 할 수 있을지 여러 가지로 이렇게 계속 생각하면서 했던 것 같아서 일단 상금을 받으면은 뭘 할지 이렇게 크게 생각은 안 해봤지만 제가 평소에 이제 덱을 만들 때 이제 카드가 많이 없어서 하고 싶은 덱을 많이 못할 때가 있는데 이번에 4월 새로운 확장팩을 되게 기대하고 있는데 4월 확장팩도 사서 이제 좀 이런저런 덱 연구도 해보고 싶고 그다음에 또 다른 거는 이제 제가 해외에 나와 보니까 여러 가지로 배울 게 많은 것 같아서 다른 나라도 한번 가보는 해외 여행도 한번 가보고 싶어요. 경계심 같은 건 없고 사실 제가 뭐 이렇게 전문적으로 하스스톤을 하는 선수는 아니었지만 뭔가 재미있게 하다 보니까 어떻게 이 자리까지 왔고 뛸 수 있는 데까지 가면 좋을 것 같아요.
I'm kind of cocky. I am very confident how I play. I think I'm one of the best players. I hit him in the face so they have less life is kind of my motto. Although it sounds kind of stupid, it's just something to actually think about in a simple way, right? You have two choices. You could trade or you can go face. If you don't really know what to do, just go face. Man, I'm not perfect, but like, I'm pretty damn close. Having fans that actually care about how you do is a really motivating and feel-good thing. Fans drive players. Hanging out, saying hi in chat, saying, man, you really did great at this tournament and I enjoyed watching, and puts a smile on my face and a motivation to play. So I was born with a bone disease called congenital pseudarthrosis. About 1 in a million people have it. Throughout my life, I've had long periods of time where I can't walk, which has led to 21 surgeries, basically a surgery a year. Video games are just the go-to thing when you can't really do anything. Hearthstone in particular, you just open it up on the iPad, which is really nice in long recovery periods. So Hearthstone's honestly just kind of been there during difficult times. I got two aspects of my life, medical and then gaming. I'm kind of on the up on gaming and the down on the medical, so it's nice to have a little balance out. So getting up on a Hearthstone stage, having a bunch of people watch you seems not as scary as going in for an 8-hour surgery where you might lose your leg coming out of it. I kind of told everyone that I was going to win Worlds this year, so this is the last shot for that. So I don't really have an option to lose here. I got Brian Kibler's Choose Your Champ vote. Everyone who's ever picked has made it to the World Championship, and I don't plan on ending his pick on a loss streak.
Really impressive story overall from Ike. Honestly, you know, without knowing that, you would think he has the you know, happiest moments ever, as he's constantly cheery, constantly laughing, constantly trying to have a good time with friends, and it does mean a lot to him, as we said then.
Yeah, and it's just an incredible bout of perspective. You know, the words there that, you know, he's the pressure of playing in a Hearthstone tournament, the fear of playing in a Hearthstone tournament. At the end of the day, it's just video games, and he has dealt with things that are much, much more serious than that and come out the other side. So it's no surprise that, you know, when he views this as such a fantastic escape for him, that he is so dedicated and passionate and happy when he's playing Hearthstone as well.
100%, but he is going to have to, you know, get over another hurdle now, and it is in the form of Definition. Ike is currently leading 1-0 with a very explosive end to that game, but completely honestly, in that specific matchup of those two decks, the game ends that quickly, whichever person wins.
Right.
It kind of comes out of nowhere, comes at you thick and fast, but now we're going to be moving on, and it's this odd Paladin versus the Warrior from Definition. Ike didn't have the best time in the world with his odd Paladin yesterday, but what do you think of it in this matchup?
It's rough. There's a lot of AoE effects available for Definition coming out the other side to be able to clear boards, and also with the lack of level up really being in Odd Paladin these days, you also don't have to treat a board of just 1/1 minions as a threat, which you did used to have to do as Odd Warrior. That was kind of the big crux of how you'd play it as Odd Paladin, is that you could just threaten a board of 1/1s and not have to expend any resources and force essentially the Warrior to use valuable clears on nothing. Now you don't have that threat because your 1/1s are just 1/1s most of the time.
Yeah, and it generates, I would say, a different kind of threat, because one, you can work out maximum damage from, say, a raid leader, right? You know, you can just sit there and just do the math straight away. You can work it out how many space on board. And then there's Frostwolf Warlord, which is a threat on its own, but Definition could just say, well, he only plays 2. I have shield slams. You know,
and 2 iron decals in the deck as well.
That is very true.
Huge.
So he can prepare for that single target threat as opposed to having to deal with constant wide boards that can convert themselves into threats.
We saw those 2 iron decals play a massive role yesterday in what's generally considered an unfavored matchup against the Death Rattle Hunter, where he really shut down a bunch of the eggs and cubes that were coming out the other way, but now seeing valuable as well in a matchup that he already feels comfortable in, just providing that extra edge to be able to take care of additional threats.
Yeah, and it seems to be going very well for Definition so far. One, a Stonehill Defender is just great against a Paladin because it will just chunk away so many 1/1s by itself. Nice stat line. And not only that, it gives you further options to create the wall that you want to do against this deck. And I'm interested to see what he picks here, because none of the picks are that terrible. Ziliax, the problem is, do you need to be reactive against this deck, or is a higher health total taunt more important?
I struggle, especially when I'm playing a deck whose role is the control deck in a matchup, to see a Ziliax and not pick a Ziliax. So
I do agree, it's very powerful.
It's the reason for me why Ziliax has become one of the most ubiquitous cards in the entire metagame. It can just fill so many roles, be so flexible, and fit in so many different styles of decks. Give me extra Ziliaxes all day.
I guess the big deal as well is there's already a Spring Rocket in hand, and that Ziliax's magnetic effect may not come into play as often as we would talk about in the current meta, because there just aren't that many other mechs, to be honest. But my idea is, when is this Ziliax going to be good? Is it going to be good much later on? Because the health gain doesn't matter.
No, I mean, I'm looking at the state of this board and saying, you know, Ike just has a bunch of 1/1s right now. If a raid leader comes down, I'd love to be able to Ziliax that raid leader instead of using one of my valuable AoEs to take care of the board instead.
Does have Spring Rocket?
That's true.
But I was just thinking that the health gain doesn't mean much right now, and does a different taunt that's just a bit bigger make you take less damage anyway. So you don't need the health generation. Maybe it's just an awkward point, but there is Frostwolf Warlord as a 9/9. Very easily made by Odd Paladin. It's actually, I kind of forgot the card existed until the nerfs hit Odd Paladin and we saw this. I was like, oh, it's actually a big boy.
Brawl. Definition plays the one ripped off the top as well. That was actually a very, very key little sequence back and forth between the two players. We saw Dynamatic. Saw Dynamatic get drawn on the previous turn for Definition, which is really one of the key cards in the matchup. Like, Dynamatic destroys Odd Paladin in a lot of spots. Ike, recognizing the threat of that Dynamatic coming down on what was about to be his opponent's turn 5, used the coin to spike his power and get that Frostwolf Warlord down. The Frostwolf Warlord essentially denied the ability for Definition to use Dynomatic on curve, and he had to find a better answer to the situation. Already had a Brawl in hand, chose to use the one he drew instead, but still has plenty of reserves yet to go.
Right, and speaking of reserves, I think there's a very relevant card in a relevant matchup right now we can talk about, because Divine Favor is going to be going away soon.
Yes.
And this is the reason why I think people are very surprised at that announcement, but Odd Paladin and, you know, say more aggressive decks shouldn't be allowed to just dump all of their hand and against a control deck, redraw their hand again for 3 mana. It's a very, very powerful tool that I think people don't appreciate how powerful it is.
Who are you to say what they should and should not be allowed to do?
I have a charge now.
Oh, okay.
I think we discussed that in the previous game. I win.
How long are you going to ride that one victory
Forever.
for? Just so I'm prepared.
Literally forever.
Okay.
So important tools here is the Divine Favor and the Divine Cleaver as well. Just so much value generation from Ike that this may look a little bit grim right now, but Ike isn't putting the taking the foot off the gas right now for a long time.
Nope.
The light dims.
Definition playing a single copy of Gluttonous Ooze in his deck as well, 2 copies of Ironbeak Owl as mentioned before, so he's running out of time to find that Gluttonous Ooze to deny the massive value coming out from the Vine Cleaver. You do see that card coming into play that Raven dictated Ike should not be allowed to do, but he does anyway.
Ike personally, this is banned for you and you only, Ike. But now we like Ike, so we can use it for this.
That's true. Wrench Girls in chat.
The choice, does he want to put the Corridor Creeper into the 3-2? What it mainly does is, especially after scene 1, it protects the Divine Shield, which may be worth a little bit more later on because of the Blessing of Mind, for example. You choose to just push an extra bit of damage face, and here comes that pick that could have been Ziliax, so...
Yes. It's definitely looking strong on this board state. It takes a lot of power to get through, and the way it's lined up, it does make Vine Cleaver on curve a very poor play as well, which honestly might be something that Definition considered at the time. You know, picking a 7-drop taunt, might have known that these could line up into the Vine Cleaver turn and potentially discourage that from coming down.
Divine Shield save now for the Righteous Protector means that can get away with a very, very big hit and still keep pressing that hero power. We saw Ike, he could have played 2 Firefly, the Firefly and the Elemental last turn and draw an additional card from Divine Favor, but he wants to press the button. And if that's someone's argument for doing it, I am never going to dispute that point, because pressing the button is very, very powerful.
Completely agree.
So is the Spring Rocket for the snipe? Is this board threatening enough to warrant something else? This is as good a time to Reckless Flurry as ever because you don't have any mana? Armor to lose. I know you said mana like you say it. What?
You get on the TJ train.
Say it.
Mana.
That's just not how you say it.
It just is.
Okay, moving on.
Sorry, what are you insinuating?
Let's say grass.
Grass.
There you go. Mana. That's how you normally say it.
It just isn't. It's just a false accusation. I speak for Queens, Lovey.
Well, I'm sorry I don't, so don't make me apologize for who I am.
Ike does find the gap to drop his Vine Cleaver, though. The problem with the Furious Etin has been dealt with. So now he is going to be able to get that rolling. And the Gluttonous Ooze is not anywhere in sight. Definition just kind of making a really awkward-looking board play there. You know, the contents of that cube is very underwhelming, and the Spring Rocket didn't really end up finding a great target as well when it came down.
I think the interesting part here is because of Faceless and Brawl, there is a chance that if Ike ever creates a big board while these cubes still exist, Definition always wins the Brawl and comes out with a very wide board in a roundabout way.
It might be time, you know, in Ike's head, he might be thinking, all right, you know what? I've seen one Brawl, I've seen one Reckless Flurry. Maybe it's time to just shut my eyes and say no more removal and just go in. But this is where something that I avoided talking about at the time really does come into play, which is Definition's choice of using his top-decked Brawl instead of the one that he already had in hand. And there's 2 schools of thought on that. One is that using the top deck one can potentially convince your opponent that you didn't already have one in hand, which can come into play later. And the other is that you not using the one you already had in hand allows your opponent a card they could have a read on, right? A card that you potentially had in hand for a long time, your opponent potentially has more information on. But seeing Ike's play here, it does appear like he is just shutting his eyes and hoping that the brawl isn't there, because as you said, extending this heavily with the biggest threat in his deck, really, the Frostwolf Warlord that's remaining, that Baku on the right-hand side aside, plus the information that there's a cube in play with minions inside it, he knows how devastating a brawl will be here, and I think he is just hoping that it isn't there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, let's wind it all the way back to yesterday. There was an opportunity where I could have gone very aggressive against Hunter as odd Paladin and didn't, and lost because of it. And he even said, you know, maybe I should have gone more aggressive with it and tried to take the win like that. And I think we might be seeing that shine through a little bit more. Maybe he's just got a bit more focused on, well, maybe you do just hit them in the face and they die. Mega Assembly not really giving Definition the mind-blowing options,
Yeah, you
I
know
would
what?
say.
Bronze Gatekeeper, this matchup, I'll take it. 3 mana, 1/5, does the job.
Magnetic, always nice too.
Yeah, using the Magnetic there, because I think particularly because there is exactly 5 damage in play there, using the Magnetic to get this 6 health taunt instead does make a big difference.
And with this Baku in hand for Ike, is there ever a point where you play it over playing something else? That sounds like a weird question, but you've seen the brawl. You've seen 2 brawls.
Yes.
And there's got to be like limited removal for a big minion left. You've seen a Reckless Flurry too.
Yeah.
The Shield Slams are still live, but there's no armor. You know, it
Yeah.
is normally you just never want to play Baku unless you have to. But
Right.
is there a consideration because of where Ike is now in this game?
There is. I think personally, I'd be looking to kind of build a wide state again first, and then wait to build up 3 or 4 tokens on the board that haven't been answered, and then play Baku alongside that, which essentially like punishes the Shield Slam style removals a little bit, right? Because you still have other minions in play pushing damage. I wouldn't in that spot Ike was in, I wouldn't have just reset with Baku, because then the Shield Slams are kind of the removals that you haven't tested for yet. So if the Shield Slam comes down, you have nothing else in play. As it happens, Ike found a Furious Etin off his Stonehill Defender, which allowed him to do a very similar thing alongside, making a pressing the hero power button as well. So he's kind of achieved the whole thing in one turn.
Yeah, I guess my wondering was, because of the 0 armor, was the Shield Slam ever going to be that realistic? 'Cause
Right.
you would need something else as well
Yeah.
to get there. But yeah, the Faceless on the Etin now sort of even the board state up to a certain extent for Definition. And this is why just Odd Warrior continues to confuse me, as it's like, at this point now, at least for Definition's list, not quite fully built like a control deck, and also built like a deck that can beat control decks because of these tools like Cube, like Faceless. The Stonehill option for Ike can just roll the dice again on that Discover. Or is this the time to turn on the Baku? Can also still play with that Lost in the Jungle. That's the problem, right, with Baku. Very difficult to do anything else on that given turn.
Yeah.
It's got a mini board state generated for those.
Ike, on the other hand, is a man of fine tastes. See Ziliax, pick Ziliax.
Also happens it just really helps kill this.
It's really
Etin.
nice
I
on
mean,
this board, yeah.
it's actually just the correct pick no matter what anyway, but...
Quiet! I want to make definitive statements like Ike would have picked that no matter what else he was offered. Sunkeeper Tarim? No! Ziliax!
Reporting for duty.
What is going on? Soto is broken. Maybe. We'll fix him soon. But Super Glider off the top. Has Ike positioned badly at all for this Super Collider?
Looks good.
I guess the only one could be the Ziliax between the 2/1/1s. Does it matter?
Well, the Ziliax is kind of threatened by the 2/2 trade anyway.
That's
so
very
There's
true,
no
yeah.
point in like perfectly positioning the Ziliax at cost of anything else, because the Ziliax is the one minion that could be traded off first for Definition to
Right.
manipulate a Super Collider.
Yep. Always good to just keep an eye on it though,
Yeah.
because these are the small things that can actually, at this level of competition, win or lose games.
Job done.
He did sequence that correctly. Okay, the way the animations went off on our screen, it looked like he shield slammed end hero powered, which it was so unlikely for him to have done, but it did look a little bit weird for a second. And there's your argument from earlier of, you know, Ike now holding back on the big threats for a little while did allow Definition to just build up that one-turn buffer of the hero power. Though in Ike's defense, he did play the big threat with the Et in that turn, and Definition just had to stall out with the taunt for one turn to build up that necessary armor to shield slam it down. But now Ike kind of executing what I was talking about, which is, hey, you know what? If you can kill this Baku, I have a lot of damage elsewhere still hanging around on board.
Yeah, we can see Definition just kind of can't.
Nope.
To be completely honest, well, he can, but it would cost him an Ironbeak Owl and the Ziliax to go in.
What now?
Maybe that's just what you do. How many Ironbeak Owls, you know, value are you looking to get in this
Actually
matchup?
doesn't look like the worst thing in the world now
Yeah.
that you say it.
That's what I mean. Like, what are you looking to Ironbeak? Double Frost with Warlord's gone.
Yeah.
And the Definition must be getting to the point now where he feels like, you know what? If I just clear this, I'm in a very good position to win this game. He has to be running out of stuff by now.
It's also nice because it leaves the Ziliax behind on a board
Also-
full of one-attack minions that would have to trade through multiple times while healing.
I was wondering as well whether he actually looks, and maybe this is not as good, 'cause you combine the lifesteal effects, but whether the 2/6 and then put Ziliax onto that.
That Void Ripper creates all kinds of possibilities. They all have their own downsides, but you know, 2/6 being changed into a 6/2, 5/8 into an 8/5 is definitely helped Ike make nicer attacks through this. One of the big problems though is that changing that 2/6 into a 6/2 buffs the lifesteal that the Definition is going to get from trading through it.
I did wonder as well if he was going to just actually go for Void Rip and then Leroy.
And Leroy, yeah,
Yeah,
considered
and
that
just
too.
let Baku hit face and be like, well, you gain some, but you're losing the same, so. Doesn't feel good, but sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good, so. I'm gonna sort of almost start again from over full health from Definition, just start chipping away now.
Out of my jungle!
This little, Miata could have gotten a little bit bigger with his
I think that's potentially the first Super Collider mistake that Ike might have made in terms of positioning. First, the decision to flip the Firefly to be a 2/1 instead of a 1/2, and then position it next to a 3-attack minion without the 1/1s being used as buffers in between. And as soon as it happens, Definition was there ready to pounce on it.
Reporting for duty.
Yeah, if you bring in Odd Warrior to a tournament, then your Super Collider, you know, input time is not very long, right? You just instantly recognize good hits. And speaking of good hits, that's a good draw. This Dynamatic is going to be able to farm many, many, many of these minions.
Ziliax Dino, potentially.
Unity. Precision.
Oh,
You
okay.
get rid of the 6 health minion first, and then Dynamatic clears up instead of being wasting damage.
Yeah. For a second, I was like, you know what? But yeah, did it.
Yeah.
Just an idiot. I just didn't really look
Yep.
at the Pinata after that.
The victory.
Yeah, and there's the concede from Ike. As we said, if Definition could have just cleaned up that last little attempt of a push from Ike, there simply just wasn't enough stuff left, and with the double lifesteal all the way back up to over 30 health, it was just too much to handle for Ike.
Yeah, Definition had some nice early options with the Reckless Flurry with the 2 brawls that he drew, and Ike wasn't really able to get enough pressure on quickly enough in order to potentially be threatening lethal before Definition got so deep in his deck that all of the other good options started coming out as well, the Dynamatics and Ziliaxes, so on. So it was a rough matchup for Ike for sure. He has, though, spoken in the past that he does sometimes feel comfortable going long with Odd Paladin against Odd Warrior, but in that case, it just wasn't to be the reality for Ike, and the series gets squared up. One game to
Double Brawl definitely helping Definition there, just extend the game long enough for him to be comfortable. He's going to even the series up. Definition versus Ike. We're going to continue after this.
Well met. It's the HCT Winter Championship. And we're on the rumble run to the finish line. From China to North America, from South Korea to Germany. 16 players from 4 regions all over the world have emerged with hopes of seizing the throne and taking the Winter Championship crown. In the end, only 4 will advance to the World Championship and their chance at Hearthstone history. Which player will be the last left standing? Nudge yourself closer to the fire, my friends. The HCT Winter Championship rolls on.
일단 제가 생각하기에 등급전을 하면서 사람들이 가장 많이 할 것 같은 덱들을 이제 생각하고 그 다음에 그 덱들을 이제 어떻게 하면은 더 좋게 이길 수 있는 라인업이 있는지 생각하고 많이 카드 같은 것도 신경 써서 라인업을 짜는 것 같아요. 일단 이미 월드 챔피언십에 간 3명을 빼고 제가 외국에 있는 선수들은 많이 모르지만 제가 이제 등급전을 하고 저번 동계 플레이오프에서 이제 몇 명의 선수들을 만나봤을 때 저는 이제 이번에 아시아에서 올라온 다른 선수들도 이제 월드 챔피언십에 충분히 갈 실력이 있지 않나 그렇게 생각해요. 하스톤 게임이 재미가 있으니까 일단 먼저 하게 되는 거고 그 다음에 제가 생각했을 때 지금 메타에선 이 덱이 좋을 것 같다라고 생각이 되면은 이제 그 덱을 해서 이제 등급전에서 등수를 올려서 뭔가 테스트 해보고 싶고 그런 게 있어서 이제 열심히 하게 되는 것 같아요.
I kind of told everyone that I was going to win Worlds this year, so this is the last shot for that. So I don't really have an option to lose here.
Which player will be the last left standing?
I play a little bit quicker than most other players because when you do the same games over and over with the same decks, like you kind of just know what's going on. My strategy is gonna yield well in this field because I'm the only one who brought Odd Paladin, and I think it's one of the strongest decks in the game right now. Yeah, so I think that my deck's overall power level is at a higher place than other lineups because I just brought less of a cohesive unit of decks and more just 4 decks that are good, while generally most people do a strategy of conquest of 4 of the same type of decks to target one specific type of matchup or archetype of decks. I think kind of in general, there's probably more pressure. It doesn't really affect me when I play. There's more pressure because you actually have like people voting for you. Packs are on the line. People are pretty vicious over their free pack. Everyone has a good shot at doing it. I mean, everyone's really good at the game, obviously. Like, they made it here, but obviously I want to be number 1.
As someone that did pick Ike as my personal Choose Your Champion, I would like to insist that it is imperative that I do get my packs, and there will be all kinds of hell to pay if I do not, Ike, all right? Sharpen up.
Sol will be very upset if he doesn't really receive more than 1 pack to be able to do it. But no, it's not the first time we've heard players just even half jokingly but half serious mention that, yeah, when you know a lot of people have voted for you, and as he said quite rightly, people get very upset about not getting free packs, it is an extra layer of pressure on the line.
Packs are serious business, dude. I don't know what you want.
Yeah. It's okay. Blizzard give us a lot of free packs nowadays.
Do they?
Yeah.
No. Us specifically?
No, not us. We get... No. Oh, God, what have I said? Twitch chat will be loving it now. I mean, the player base with the quests and the expansion packs and such. But moving swiftly on before I dig myself in a deeper hole, Ike going to be on the Warlock now in definition on this Priest again. And, you know, I know we sort of touched on the Priest in the previous, or the game before that, should I say. What do you think of this as a deck and as a bring to this tournament?
2 very different questions. What do I think of it as a deck? I loathe it and wish it would disappear. I think it is dull and uninteresting, generally.
Say what you really feel, Sol.
I always will. as a bring to this tournament, I actually think it's very, very reasonable. I think it's, if you consider this kind of hybrid meta game that we have, where there are some aggro decks, there are some control decks, there are some anti-control, I think War Priest is very well positioned to kind of adapt its game plan and be able to answer all of those different threats in different ways. You can see that where it's, so far had a pretty reasonable matchup against the Clone Priest, where Ike did have to find a pretty fluky victory off that randomly generated extra Mind Blast, and now is just another good matchup coming up against the Evenlock, so multiple opportunities for Definition to get this deck across the line.
Yeah, one of the problems Evenlock does have in this matchup is that, Spellbreaker in a minion doesn't really do much because he's not going to buff it till it wins anyway.
Yep.
And Warlock's life total, it gets played with quite often, right? It always goes down normally. And, we talked about the Tar Creeper from the previous matchup saying, oh, well, you need like the Powered Shield, Divine Spirit, Inner Fire to get the job done. Well, you need much less of those when your opponent is doing a lot of the work for you.
Yep.
Speaking of Tar Creepers and Powered Shields,
as the old Reynard quote goes, it's a rough matchup when both classes are trying to kill the same person.
Never heard that quote before.
It's pretty good, though, isn't it?
Can't argue with logic.
Yeah. Reynard's a very witty young lad.
Yeah, agreed.
Raven is not.
It's because I'm not young.
True.
Won't talk about the rest of it, though. So, Tar Creeper and the Powered Shields mean that Definition can get going, and also on the flip side of the Powered Shields enabling an easier kill, most importantly, you don't need them to enable a kill because of how powerful Divine Spirits will be. So these can just be used to cycle, to be completely honest.
Definition heals up Ike from 26 to 28. That was not a hero power and emote turn like we saw from Ike in the Priest Mirror. That is a very real idea of trying to limit the speed with which Ike can get out his own threats.
I think I even saw just a slight smirk from Definition. It's like, this play looks dumb, but it's correct. And it's like, I heal you.
It is interesting though, because there is the point you made where the intentional lowering of the health from Warlock does help you to really just scam out some really quick wins with Divine Spirit, Topsy, or Inner Fire combos.
I think most importantly, it doesn't help him right now because he doesn't have an activator, right? He doesn't have the attack equal to health, whether that be Topsy-Turvy or Inner Fire. So there is no point right now, and also those might be pretty low in the deck. So for now, I think it's fine. Reaching the 20s is actually very easy with this deck.
Yeah.
So anything, too quick means that it's just going to actually get beaten up. Now the question's a little bit weird. Do you visions first, or do you want to draw more? Or you can use the Powered Shields instead. But the visions into a Topsy means that this is live and it's just not a surprise pick. Already now, there is a potential win condition in the hand.
Or a potential removal condition. Yep.
Okay.
I
like it.
Yeah, something I was going to lead into about the matchup as well is that sometimes you aren't necessarily looking for the flip and kill, the Divine Spirit Inner Fire or the Topsy win condition. Sometimes you can just get deep into a Spellstone and it just revives so many stats that there's just no card in Evenlock that can deal with that board state.
And also bear in mind that Topsy-Turvy was effectively an added copy. There's still a Topsy-Turvy, there is still a Inner Fire in the deck.
The opportunity cost of that play was the Powered Shields in terms of the 2 health, right? They replace themselves by drawing a card. You just then don't have that +2 buff later in the game. You still have 2 Divine Spirits, an Inner Fire, and a Topsy-Turvy in your deck.
Our second Tar Creeper's gone down. Definitely working out where he aims this heal, if he wants to press the button or not. But most importantly now, with 2 Mass Hysterias and 2 Psychic Screams, Definition can just say no whenever he wants.
And I think
for the future of this game, I feel like.
And I think it's another great reason why taking care of that Mountain Giant was such a good idea. When the Mountain Giant came down, I wanted to say that it was just kind of the only real test in the matchup. Unanswered Mountain Giant, just running wild. It's too late to wait to Psychic Scream it, and it doesn't really interact well with Mass Hysteria for you, the Priest player.
Yeah.
So if you can deal with that Mountain Giant, everything else is just kind of fine. You're just happy to leave it hanging around for a while until you need to clear it. So I definitely respect the play from Definition.
Yeah, very, very nice play as well with this Grizzly. It might look quite silly. Oh, I'll make a 3/3 Grizzly for 5 mana. But this now puts Definition on either removal in the form of Psychic Screams, or even Mass Hysterias, to be fair, or into Spellstone, because I can be thinking he either doesn't care about how wide my board is because he has an answer, therefore he doesn't need a high health Grizzly if he's going to scream anyway, or he's setting it up for Spellstones to just get it in the rest book.
Yeah.
Getting close. It's actually a pretty reasonable Mass Hysteria, I think.
Yeah,
Again,
depending on how many times the 6/6 iterates. And that is lovely. If you are a Korea fan, a Definition fan, or just a Priest fan.
Yeah, Frodan touched on it yesterday that Mass Hysteria maths becomes kind of stupid after 4 minions or so. But with that, the attacks and health of the minions were just very straightforward in that, well, yeah, if this attacks this, it kills it, and then if this attacks again, we get
Yeah,
it.
if you want like cheat sheets, like ways to get reasonably close eyeballing things while you're just playing on ladder, like think about the one thing that you need to happen, right? Like in that case, you needed 2 attacks to interact with the Dread Infernal for it to go well for you, and just try and think about the odds of that happening as opposed to trying to run through every permutation in your mind, because you can't. It's not possible.
It's more like Math Hysteria.
Yes! That was just the right type of bad. Congratulations.
That's all actually left. Okay, so there are now just 2 more minions on the board for Ike. So Ike's still just plugging away even through that Mass Hysteria. Now the Lich King's in the way. Ame the Dead. Not really what Definition's looking for, at least until he draws an Inner Fire. Maybe it's not so bad after that because he can win, but you definitely don't want to burn those Inner Fires or Topsy-Turvy. And this is the fear of playing against a Priest deck like this. Naturally, I would be like, oh, just silence it, push damage, let's go. You can't, because you might just be dead next turn if you don't kill the Lich King.
Yeah.
You literally just don't know. So there has to be some level of respect to every single minion that Definition plays, especially when it's got a starting health of 8 and above.
This is a key play from Ike, willing to sacrifice the remainder of his Twilight Drake and a Homunculus to just say, you know what, I want my clean Gul'dan turn next turn. Really, really badly. I don't want to have to mess around with any of these nonsense minions that you can play that can threaten to kill me from 30 if I leave it alive. I want an empty board so I don't have to think and I can play my 10 drop on 10.
Right, and you can actually even start to potentially plan out Ike's process here. Is Gul'dan on an empty board next turn. I'm talking best case scenarios, of course. Gul'dan next turn, and then the turn after, he can either Spellbreaker or Spellstone, and then Mojo Master Zihi. That works very well at disrupting what Definition will want to do. Can't as easily do some combination of cards a little bit later on. So, and Ike still putting a pretty beefy board down. So, I think I see the plan from Ike. The only worry is, does Definition need a lot of mana to do the combo? I heard it's a pretty cheap combo.
It's relatively efficient, yes. Definition, of course, with open deck list, does know that the threat of Mojo Master Zihi is ripe and in his forefront. So I think using that Psychic Scream to take care of what is a pretty oppressive board state before it can come down and lock him out is fairly smart.
No need to create awkward situations. Just get the screams used, because now Definition's really just either planning on just dumping this Spellstone or just buying time until he can get one of those damage activators for his combo. Right.
Just a sip, then you are mine. Shield up!
And just a quick note as well, actually, about Ike's list, his Warlock list, is that he's only playing Mojo Master Zihi. There are no Unravelers in there that we've been seeing such common yesterday plays. So Mojo Master is the one card that's disruptive. There is no Unraveler he can drop to make things a little bit more difficult.
Unfortunately for Ike, though, that did not work out too well for him. Yes, it says set your opponent, set both players to 5, but it passes back to them with 6. And then by holding the coin, the Spellstone was able to come out, and there's just that huge pile of stats that I mentioned is just so difficult for Warlock to deal with.
Yep, you get to the tipping point where you've used removal, removing the solo versions, but when they come back as the returning threesome, then it's just a problem that you can't put as much removal into multiple minions with that kind of health.
Not to mention, this bear was a 3/3 when it had to be dealt with the first time.
And I'll repeat myself because why not? But these Spellbreakers do almost nothing on this board state. I think probably just considering the Hellfire potentially along with Hero Power. Is he going to go for Doom?
So he's dropping Doomsayer, yeah.
Okay, well, he's just saying, might be dead.
Again, I like it because how is he really dealing with a 3/9 or a 3/11 as it could be next turn if it gets healed up, or even if he pings it, it can still then be healed up to a 3/8 again. You know, he needs a plan to remove this from the board, or just essentially any inner fire or Topsy-Turvy draw is going to be very close to lethal at this point.
I also actually think it's a very... Oh, that's a problem. That Mass Dispel is a problem for Ike. He's given his opponent a 7 health minion that he cannot kill. Or he just uses a lot of his own resources to kill his own minion. Because with Shadow Madness, Definition could just steal the Doomsayer.
Yep.
And kill him.
It's not super relevant if there's a 3/12 on the board anyway, but yes, it can be a problem later if Ike is able to deal with this.
Well, that's it, right? It's either Ike deals with the minion and continues the game, or he doesn't and he loses.
Right.
So if he does continue the game, that Doomsayer is still there. And it's why I initially liked the play from Ike, because it gets it out the way when your opponent would kill you anyway.
Exactly sure what's remaining in the deck for the Oak Heart. We've only seen one Moshog, right?
Yep. And one... Oh no, sorry, the second bear's in hand, I didn't see that.
And we've seen 2 Tar Creepers as well, I think.
Still, completely reasonable fight turn next turn, if it comes to it. Because, again, like, not only will it pull the 2/14 out, it's also 5/5 on the board that yes, can still be buffed up and kill you. So there are so many threats.
Oh, there's still the Ziliax as well.
Oh, right, yeah. I always forget about Ziliax in this list because it's got 2 health.
Right.
Why would you play it in this deck? Well, because the card's good.
5 mana 3/2 sounds terrible.
Yeah, that's bad. When you add the stats together, every other card's better than this.
Life coach strats.
That's so funny. Ziliax is a terrible card.
It's a story for another time.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was talking about earlier. As soon as Definition kind of threw away that Topsy-Turvy, it was clear that this was kind of his long-term strategy. And almost before that, really, when he started healing Ike's face, essentially buying more time for himself before big threats could come down, you could kind of see that he was setting out his stall for the long game, where he could just essentially overpower the limited amount of value. You know, in life coach terms, honestly, add up all the stats in the deck, and one of these is clearly winning, right? Like, Evenlock is going to run out of stuff long before the Wall Priest does.
This feels like an almost, sorry to cut you off, this feels almost like a certainty with the Shadow Visions that he can get either in a Fire or Topsy. And this is spicy, though, because can this just be lethal?
Well, to pick up on your thread from earlier, Ike actually taunted his Doomsayer as well, which first off puts another threat in the way, and secondly, if it's not Shadow Visions out of the way here for lethal, it means that Definition will have to kill it and remove that Shadow Visions threat from the equation in the future.
Yeah. I'm just working out whether Deathco removes the 4/4, you can still Shadow Madness, the 0/7, at best to just get it out the way. And do you have enough mana to open it up? I don't believe you do this turn, but you could set up for some level of that next turn.
Right. Yeah, Shadow Madness, Shadow Visions, and Death Coil's already 8, so you don't have enough room for big Divine Spirit combos on top of that.
Yep, you just need 2 more mana and the Topsy to get it to work.
Yeah, so I like this. Just play your big boys.
Oh, Cleric. It's only 3 health.
Ike assuming the position of a man that has just said to himself, there's got to be a defile here.
Well, now we might see the Spellbreakers getting some work.
Hang on. There actually might be.
Because you can Spellbreaker the 3/2.
Well, he already has the 1. The 6 into the 6/5 into the 3/8 makes the 2, and then he can create 3s with various iterations of his hero power or the Spellstone, and that goes through or up to Okar. Obviously, he's not killing the 214 Divine
I was going to
Shield.
say, you're not telling me there's a defile that gets
but it
there.
will lower its health significantly to the point where it's very hard for it to be then Divine Spirit Inner-Fired to kill afterwards.
You know what's kind of crazy? We're going to see a Death Coil to heal a minion to give it enough health to create lethal. That's a spicy one. Can't play around that. Looks like Ike agrees.
Yep.
Put the Mushrock to 4. That looks like it adds up
And
to
then
me.
the 3 is on the Ziliax.
Yep.
And that goes through the Okar as I described, and we're just going to leave behind the remains of that Moshog Enforcer.
Oh. Okay, well, if there's ever a time to just at least pop out Shadow Vision and see what happens, you can now. As it's all going to start adding into that Spellstone to just say, well, do that again, Ike. I've got more minions than you have Defiles, even when you won for 4.
That's lethal, I believe. Shadow Madness 2/4 kills the Doomsayer, double Divine Spirit, Topsy-Turvy. It had to be the Topsy and not the Inner Fire to make it happen, but Definition recognized it right at the start, and that is going to be a 36 damage flip to the face for Ike. He is going to go down 2-1 in this series, which he felt unfavored in, and you're following along at home to see why, as these matchups are looking very, very tough for him as the series progresses.
Yeah, Odd Warrior into Paladin was always going to be rough, and as I said, I actually think it was a matter of time until this Priest deck got the win, because there are just not enough decks that Ike has that can either A, put on enough pressure, and B, continually deal with these minions that have absurd amounts of health. And you saw there were many times in that game alone where we were saying, oh wait, it's either just one card off, a couple of mana off, one minion taunted away. It was always close to lethal, and it's a horrendous game to play if you're Ike and having to try and defend against that every single turn.
Yeah, and if you're a tech play god at home, if you're a Hearthstone puzzle monster, take a look at that defile turn for Ike, because the turn that Ike ended up doing is what I looked at straight away as well. What I then was trying to find is a turn that did the same thing but dealt potentially more damage to the Moggoth, which then makes it much harder. Like potentially you can save your hero power and hero power it down afterwards to take more health off it at the end. If that kind of thing is possible, it then makes it much harder to be Divine Spirit and a Fire killed on the following turn.
Yeah, really, really tough game. And
tweet me, let me know.
Tag me in too.
Yeah.
So again, those Spellbreakers that you think are going to be good, they're good against a deck that buffs, right? It's like, well, no, because they buff on the same turn, they kill you.
Right.
So those two were just pretty much just dead in hand for the whole game. So not only is it a rough matchup, minus cards going into the hand as well, but Definition's looking pretty good. And I will say, I feel like his play's just got a little bit more solid today than it was yesterday. I was a little bit worried when we saw the Hakar Druid kind of fizzle out to a certain extent from the match we cast yesterday, but I think he's timed it up. And now, Admirable's worst nightmare. Are there any big tech differences in these decks?
Good question. There are no of the little poison man, whose name I always forget.
We have turned our
Stubborn Gastropod, which is the go-to tech card when you're expecting a lot of even lock mirrors. It really helps to dictate the early exchange of when a giant can come down. Definition, though, is also only playing a single copy of Doomsayer, which is kind of an effect that can do the same thing. But aside from that, relatively consistent all the way through until you get to that spot where we talked about how Ike was playing Mojo Master Zihi and no Unraveler, whereas Definition has gone the opposite way. He is playing the Nerubian Unraveler, no Mojo Master Zihi.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried that you couldn't remember the name of Stubborn Gastropod. You just looked at me and I made no face whatsoever or told you, and then you went, oh yeah, Stubborn Gastropod.
Yeah.
The small poison man. And then you looked at me for inspiration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You are extremely toxic as well.
Untrue. It's Spellbreaker now already getting a way more use than it did in the last game for Ike, just clearing off that Doomsayer. At least they're removing the threat and progress himself onto the board there. And now the ball's in Definition's court, although I see a Mountain Giant that it can be played. Go for it.
Nope.
Why? Kind of serious question.
Right, so the fact there's a 4-3 in play already, Definition probably feels that if he plays a Giant here and then Ike responds with another big threat of his own, Definition doesn't really have the privilege of going face in the spot, like, nor do you really want to a lot of the time, because going face allows your opponent to power out more threats even quicker with the Hooked Reavers. So he probably feels like with a Spellbreaker on board, there's no real reason for him to have gone Giant there, because he's just going to use the Drake to trade with the Spellbreaker anyway.
Yeah, and look at the respect already as well. Just not going to hit face either. Just going to whack into this Doomsayer and see what happens. Although, these are the kind of even lock mirrors I like, because I feel like it's just Giant, 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 Twilight Drake. Go. Who's going to win? Who's going to win the trades? And who's going to just get so far ahead that health totals now no longer matter because they just have so much power on the board versus their opponent. Ike looks to be in a strong position though, because he got the first minion to stick, he got the first Giant down, and he has a second Giant to play next turn if he so chooses. So now we might see double trades across the board.
Yeah, it's always a tough line to map out, and it's a hard thing to justify as well, because now Ike's Giant can potentially take a value trade with both a Twilight Drake and a Mountain Giant. Like, that's a world that can realistically happen, which obviously sounds awful if you're Definition. The thing you have to remember is that in the meantime, Ike will play more minions as well, so Definition has the opportunity to do the same thing on the other side, right? Like, he can now pick up a value trade into a Homunculus, and then potentially a Giant after that as well. So it's really not that simple when both players are playing very similar threats back and forwards as they are.
Yeah, both players, I feel, had very good plays with that Homunculus, though. Homunculus stopping the Giants being emergency traded into each other. And then also on the flip side of that, Definition having that Spellstone proc, so he can kill off the Giant very, very efficiently with that Spellstone for 5. And now what is the big question? Because I think we saw this similar... Forgive me, cannot remember the matchup. I want to say it was it Thunderup versus Ike? I think it was, where they played an even lock mirror and they were just punching each other. It was very much back and forth. Every time one of them had a strong turn, the other had the answer and something as well. And I feel like this is kind of the way it's going in this matchup too. Both players having pretty reasonable opening hands. So it really is just who's going to gain that tiny extra inch in the matchup. 9 health, very annoying right now.
Yeah, good usage of the Sun Fury from Ike as well, as I've really been talking about for the last 3 turns. Both of these players are just trying to get control of who dictates the trades. There's been various factors that have gone into that, you know, from who went first to the sequencing of the threats from both players, and now we're seeing just another spanner thrown in the gears, where Ike just says, hey, I'm going to choose who you can attack by using the Sun Fury Protector. You want to potentially trade 8-6 with 8-6 and put a 9 health taunt in the way. Hope for the best.
Yeah, it's a tough one to break down, isn't it? Because immediately Dread Infernal says, hey, I do the 1 damage to trade into the Twilight Drake and my Mountain Giant doesn't die. But then you've got to see just the value of a Spellbreaker removing 8 health off this and developing a reasonable sized minion as well. So all kind of up in the air though, but Definition went for the Spellbreaker and then leaving the Twilight Drake as a 4-1. This might look a little bit unfortunate, but he could taunt up the Doomsayer if he wanted to, and also has the 4-1 live if it survives as a defile target next turn.
Does end up taunting both though, and it's honestly the first kind of weak-looking turn from either side. It's a turn where, you know, anytime you're playing like a fairly tempo-based matchup, which this really kind of is, anytime your opponent can start the turn, trade down the board, and basically just have a clean slate to develop on, that's a bad turn for you. And that's basically what Ike can do here.
I wonder.
Ike's curve from here showing no signs of slowing down either. He's got really powerful stuff coming out. Dread Infernal available, Lich King coming down next turn as well. Neither player has the luxury of the Gul'dan to come over the next couple of turns.
I will say though, with one Spellstone being used for Definition and that Spellbreaker now, Lich King, if Ike can get it down safely,
Yeah.
never dies, I think, you know, for a very long time at least. And there's even the potential that Lich King to Mojo Master might just be correct, to just reduce options even more while you still have the Lich King on the board, because there are no Gul'dan. So it's not like you're blocking yourself out of a Gul'dan, you don't have it. We're going for it now.
Just a sip.
Wow, okay.
I'm slightly surprised by that. Mainly because Lich King's right there. I can see him. Middle of the hand.
I guess Ike's worry is exactly the opposite. You know, sight unseen, he's thinking of the potential Lich Kings that his opponent can play there. He could have gone Dread Infernal, which I believe leaves enough threat in play. No, it wouldn't have done,
No,
because
'cause the
the Sun Furies would have been able to trade with each other, which would have left just 6 damage in play, and then a Lich King would have come down from Definition. So yeah, I think that's I don't want to call it a fearful play. That sounds like a negative connotation, but it's a play that respects the ability of Definition taking over the game with big bombs from that spot.
As you can tell already just from watching this game and the health totals anyway, it is very much about the board control. Because I was even thinking, well, maybe Definition gets the Lich King down first and hits face with it. Well, then there's double Hooked Reaver in hand for Ike, so you can like reverse swing. And it all gets very complicated, and it's how far you're choosing to walk down that path.
Yeah.
Basically, that doesn't actually exist yet, is one of the weird choices that you have to make, especially in a matchup that's as focused as this one.
I think if there's one thing we've learned about Definition in this series so far in terms of play tendencies, it's that he's very willing to take it slow against an even lock.
Yes.
He is not really in the business of rushing down, at least based on the matchup and what we saw from the Priest in the previous game.
Yeah, even from yesterday, I feel like Definition kind of just always plans for the game to go long. And then he's just like, yeah, okay, you know, it's going to go deep, so I'll just do everything to prep for that if it happens to go quicker, fine.
He's got, if that's his plan, he's got a good lineup for it.
Well, yeah.
If he likes playing long games of Hearthstone, Odd Warrior. There it is.
But I mean, even that Topsy change, right?
Yeah.
The Topsy usage
Yeah.
with the Priest, well, that's not a game-winning play, because, as in a killing play, because Topsy could have been used a little bit late and you win the game.
Right.
But Topsy was used to prolong the game. So I do feel like it's a bit of a tendency he has.
I wonder.
Now, one of the drawbacks for the Nerubian Unraveler tech versus the Mojo is, on its own, it does very little, because most players can deal with a 5/5, especially if they're ahead on board, of course. So it doesn't have the direct impact that the Mojo Master does. And I think we're seeing that a little bit now. It feels very much like a bit of a dead card, because if you play it well, it doesn't have to cast spells to kill it, so it does nothing. It's literally a 6-mana 5/5.
Almost out of time.
There's no like double defile weird stuff here, is there, right?
Nothing that I like. I did look at it briefly, but I didn't really see the value of it. I was just... I did look at this play with the Shroom Brewer. I was spending a lot of time like weighing up the various implications of which 6-drop to play there. They're all slightly different in terms of which value trade or which trades they would enable on the board. Like playing Dread Infernal there, for example, would have allowed the Acidic Swampooze to trade into your Twilight Drake with the remaining health, which would have been slightly unpleasant. Again, Greymane, the extra attack didn't really achieve anything on board, whereas Nerubian Unraveler as a 5/5 kind of fit the bill. I kind of got distracted from the Shroom Brewer line, which I think overall creates the most board tension, the most awkward board state for Ike to deal with. He doesn't really have any good available trades on board.
Yeah, I was even looking at the Shroom Brewer with a Defile, but there was no mana to double Defile Shroom Brewer or Twilight Drake up. So yeah, it's looking a little bit rough there, but still made a reasonable board that Ike definitely has to sit and ponder to try and work out the best way to clean this up. Again, it's just the battle of who's not playing Dread Infernals, because multiple turns now we've like, oh, the one damage from the Dread Infernal would do something here.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is just the consideration that Spellstone procs are super important in this matchup. You know, a 3 damage Spellstone does very little. I think you can kind of see that here. Not only was the Dread Infernal really strong that turn, but it also created a scenario where perfect timing, the Spellstone was drawn and he was able to get the buff on that, so it now is a functional threat for that Lich King that he's been worried about for several turns now since his own Mojo Master Zihi play.
Also, so good to know Ike is just ticking along to 15 health. And next turn, if he takes any form of damage that's available on board, means that he will be below that threshold, which does mean a double Hooked Reaver turn. And Evenlock does not often have a good answer to that, especially if minions survive. So it's 2 7/7 taunts and something else. Like, that's very difficult to pull out of the bag in terms of removal.
The worry here, and a big reason why I think potentially Definition would love to have a Lich King to play, is if Ike did see a Lich King come down, you know, just double trade into the 6/6, drop a Lich King, he'd have to Spellstone it. And he's not in the range now where he can play a Hooked Reaver first and then Spellstone afterwards. So he'd then be healing himself up and pulling himself out of range. So this lack of Lich King in hand for Definition, you know, I've been talking so much about Ike having that read that I honestly forgot for a second myself that Lich King wasn't in hand
He
for
actually
Definition.
doesn't have it.
I was about to start talking about the play as if it was. The fact it's not there is just a huge, huge win for Ike overall.
Yeah, nice double trade there, though, from Definition, just saying, well, actually, you still have to tap if you want to do this, if you want to double Hooked Reaver, and if you tap, you can't double Hooked Reaver, so it's kind of a lose-lose scenario here. But to be honest, from Ike at this point, because this Homunculus can be cleaned up, I think now's the time for the Lich King.
I wonder.
It's not dead on board. Yes, a Defile plus trade happens, but you gain the card, you force the Defile, it eats the Infernal. Lich King's done enough. He can just call it a day after that, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. There he is, finally. Lich King and Bowmare coming into hand back to back. Bowmare probably a card that I didn't give enough credit to in the past in terms of things that Ike was playing around in terms of his Mojo Master Zihi timing and so forth. Because Bowmare on a lot of those boards would have just honestly been equally devastating, kind of the states that he was interacting with.
Definition now just has the Hooked Reaver down as the perfect 15 health. Means that it's all on Ike to try and now defend. Spellstone Doomsayer?
I think so.
Going once, going twice.
So
yeah, you can see already the previous turn or so with the Spellstone versus this pitiful looking one from Definition is going to tickle the minions to death is the grand plan here.
yeah. Comes obvious when you see it in the light of day that you really do want to be greedy with your self-damaging effects as much as you can to really activate those Spellstones, because they just tickle at 3 damage against Evenlock minions, just really achieving nothing.
Also as well, no 4-drop to actually, there was a trade Defile Spellstone level of damage there, I think, that removes it, but it just wasn't enough. So Definition just has to pass.
Ike, not with the most explosive of turns. That Bowmare pickup does give him something pretty juicy to do. But again, still being above 15, didn't really have that huge power play that he would have loved to have had with double Hooked Reaver, for example.
Kind of a tough scenario here because the 6-drop into Spellbreaker now is a very nice, just 2 minion turn 10, or sorry, 10 mana. But the minion you are silencing does kill the Spellbreaker through silenced anyway. So you aren't really getting a net gain from that overall. Did he just drop the Lich King? No nice trades on board. You get a card. Maybe the card's good. Death Coil cleans him up.
Saying a lot of nice things. The optimist in you is coming out.
Sometimes you have to be optimistic when you play this game, Sol. And I think a bad trade is as good as Definition is going to hope for at this point in the game.
No, I agree.
And also, to be honest, Obliterate really isn't bad in this matchup. You don't often want to take a lot of damage, but 2 mana go away is a pretty good card a lot of the time.
So many possibilities.
I think it's a nice time to kill the Lich King with his own sword. Agreed. disagreed? You decide, so.
It's my choice. It's scary.
It's Hack's choice, but
It's a lot of damage to take. I think the Spellbreaker that's been drawn... sorry, not the Spellbreaker. The Shroom Brewer that's been drawn recently will give him a little bit of extra security. But it is still a ton of damage to take. It doesn't mean pressure will get on very quickly. And of course, you have to remember you're facing down an unknown Lich King card on the other side as well, which could represent death blow damage.
This does represent a lot of damage as well. 2/7 attack minions. The Ooze can get cleaned up pretty nicely with this weak Spellstone. But the idea from Ike is that's just not enough. And maybe Ike's holding the weapon to make Definition not play around it. Say, well, like you just mentioned on the other side, well, there's a Lich King card. What is it? Completely forgot about that interaction. Good job, Definition.
I was seconds away from sounding mechanically stupid. I was about to talk about that same play, but doing it in reverse, which would have ended up with less healing.
Right.
Just about caught myself in my head that it would work that way, and then Definition had already executed the play. But it's a good catch from him to recognize that, of course, Obliterate does buff the Spellstone. If you played it even lock enough, you probably come across that interaction at some point.
Most recent weird version of it is the cheaty ankle biter proccing Spellstone.
Yes.
When you shoot yourself with it. Very strange.
Delightful.
Yeah. Now with Guldans on both sides of the board here in terms of player hands, the options do go a little bit wider because now the tough decision is, yes, Gul'dan's super powerful, but he's spending my whole turn kind of doing nothing powerful enough. As you can see, if Gul'dan comes down, that Retriever does not die. Which means that Ike gets an initiative on the trades that are going to happen, and we can also create this board too.
Yep. Definition will feel happy about the fact he gets both Homunculus back with the revive. Does give him the security, at least protecting just from lethal, because the way he's looking at it, it's just 11 damage in play. He's even with the armor, pushes himself just up to 15.
I was going to ask what you thought about the trade, because is there a way in which you can I can trade the minion off and then re-summon straight away with Gul'dan? But the two Homunculus obviously make that less of an issue.
And even then, it's a 7/3 coming back as a 4/4 is not the worst thing in the world. I think he just wants to make sure that it is a 7/3, so he can have options to bite it on the following turn or use Hellfire, whatever it's going to be.
Even potential defiles with the trade into the Homunculus.
Yeah. I think that trade makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Both players got to have a completely reasonable game. You go Gul'dan, I'll go Gul'dan, and then we'll continue playing. See who wins. Hake's board now, though, as you can already see, just that little bit wider. Although Defile combined with a Hellfire and with that ever flexible hero power means
Doesn't need the Hellfire.
Means that there's often a way to clear the board.
There is. If he just pings down the 6/6 to 3, right, he can then Defile, and then crucially that Defile stops at 5. He keeps his own Dread Infernal, if I'm looking at it right.
Looks that way to me.
1 and 2 already exist. Ping the Dread Infernal down to 3. It hits 4 and then iterates a 5th time, and the 6/1 will survive to be able to push damage.
And also saves mana to play stuff. Definition agrees with Sottle.
Does the game. More importantly, rules judge. Thank you.
Hey!
All right.
6 to the face, go. And also just being able to develop an additional minion now that it's pretty nice. And I don't know about you, Sol, but I'm looking at finally getting that Nerubian Unraveler down, because if it stops one spell being cast that well, great, it's done a good job. And you know the Inferno's going to 100% die to the minimum of a hero power.
And now Ike does have a problem. He's going to need this Frostmourne. Oh, and that just says it. I barely have to make my point anymore. If you want to see how important that Frostmourne could end up being, just look at Definition's reaction. Because with Ike 2 cards deeper in Fatigue, he needs to set up a board that wins the game, because he cannot just sit here pinging back and forth and trading minion for minion. He is going to end up losing that battle, but the acidic Swampoos immediately make short work of it.
There was a very quick moment there. I was like, Definition didn't want to cast any spells, right? I was like, don't just slam it. Oh, no, it's okay. He is just going to play the hook tree with hero power.
Right.
But there's just a moment where I would have done that on ladder, gone, ha, no weapon. Oh no, I can't use my spells now.
Yeah, it's just, I'll just ooze the weapon and then spellstone the 5. Oh.
Oops.
And Ike, with one card remaining in his deck, is facing the Grim Spectre of Fatigue, potentially ending his run in the upper side of the brackets here.
Also as well, just the fact that he might just die to any other minion that's played from Definition at this point as well. Fatigue obviously is sort of a never-ending problem now for Ike, but Definition's just still got the power minions on board. If they have to be cleared, then Ike loses the 5/5 and you'd imagine a hero power or Hellfire if he wants to clear the whole board.
Yeah.
But then that comes with its own problems of damaging himself.
Your magic shall not save
Shroom Brewer into hero power. Wow, this is a nice play actually. This was making as good as it as I can. And with what, 13 power, 16 with the hero power means that it's setting up to create lethal over the next 2 turns.
Yep.
But not if Definition has anything to do with it.
And that's one board state dealt with. He has the same again, following up after this, Hellfire plus Ping yet again, which will take care of the last remainder of Ike's minions, and I believe that will spell lights out for Ike in this game and this potentially this series. There it is, same again. Hellfire, Ping off the remainder. I think Ike is locked out.
Yeah, with being behind, not only behind in Fatigue, but now pretty much just out of minions, I don't think it's even remotely close to mathematically possible for Ike to win this game. And he realizes it too. And there's the concede from Ike, and Definition goes through the group 3 and 1. Korea are still in the game, continuing to fight for that spot at the World Championships.
Yeah, and domination really so far from the regions that we haven't come to expect it from. APAC and China both putting in dramatically improved showings. APAC have definitely been on the uprise, whereas China I think have been consistently mediocre, I will say, throughout most of their championship performances. But both of those regions now, China off again to a great start, and now Definition threatening to follow up on that legacy, not just in Hearthstone, but it seems in just esports in general. There is always a Korean on top of the game, and specifically in terms of Hearthstone, we have always had Korean representatives at the Hearthstone World Championships.
Yeah, and also again, I'd just like to raise it that so many different players are bringing so many different decks in so many different lineups. Definition brought Wall Priest, getting it done. Most players have brought Clone. There's some other priests in there as well. Big, true mixed bag of decks we've had over this tournament, but there is Group C.
Yeah, not just the Wall Priest. He's playing Odd Warrior, which we're really not seeing from many other people in the tournament. He's playing Hakar Druid, which is not a common deck in the tournament either, and he's used those decks to go on a 2-0 run, taking care of Simiao and then Ike in relatively comfortable fashion, I would say, looking very, very clean in terms of his route through so far.
Yep, Definition seemed pretty cool, calm, and collected to me. That's what he seems like to the guys, as I believe he's ready for his interview.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm joined by Definition. Congrats on your victory. I want to ask, Ike, going into this match, felt like he was really unfavored and didn't really have confidence. Do you feel the same way, but the opposite? Did you feel very confident and strong going into this match?
이번 대회는 어떻게 보면 그 데피니션 선수가 더 유리했는데 어떤 생각을 하셨나요? 그런 생각으로 하셨나요?
네, 이번 라인업은 제가 좀 준비한 라인업이랑 맞는 상대랑 붙어서 좀 편안하게 했던 것 같아요.
Yes, this is definitely the lineup that I was targeting, so I was much more at ease.
Gotcha. Well, one question I wanted to ask is that the East is really crushing the West. Today, no one from Europe or Americas is able to get the win. Is this kind of like you guys marching back and showing the West that the East can also play some really good Hearthstone?
지금 이번 챔피언십은 어떻게 보면 이제 중국과 지금 아시안 쪽이 더 우세한데 그 북미하고 유럽 쪽은 선수가 한 명도 안 올라왔는데 이게 어떻게 보면 이번에 이제 그거에 대해서 어떻게 생각하세요?
아직 8강에 올라간 사람이 3명밖에 안 나와서 뭐 이렇게 단정 지을 수는 없지만 조금 기세로 봐서는 좀 아시아 쪽이나 이제 그쪽이 좀 강한 것 같아요.
I can't say for certain because we only have 3 right now. But like just looking at it right now, it seems like it's the time of China and Asia Pacific.
That's right. I mean, the crown for the world champion is technically in Asia Pacific since Tom 602291. So good luck there. The last thing I wanted to ask you is, now that you're through to the top 8, you only have one more match. How are you going to prepare for tomorrow to see if you can go to the top 4 of the world championship and play for the seasonal crown?
이제 월드 진출권은 이제 한 경기만 남았는데 어떻게 준비하실 거예요?
일단 여기 모인 16명의 선수들이 진짜 누가 올라가도 부족하지 않은 선수들인데 그 중에 한 명이 될 수 있도록 노력하겠습니다.
Like I first want to say that all 16 players here are all good and anybody can make it to top 4 and I really am going to try to be one of them.
All right. Well, congratulations, Definition. Very solid and very polite answers, as we expect from a top-level Korean player here in Hearthstone Esports. Back over to you guys at the desk.